Hello, Janesville, and welcome back to Park Place Views, the monthly program that aims to keep Janesville residents informed by highlighting the people, places, and partners of the City of Janesville. As always, this program is brought to you by the City of Janesville and JATV Media Services. I'm your host, Amanda Gilbert, the Communication Specialist for the City of Janesville. In last month's episode, we sat down with Michelle Ryan, the Executive Director for Rotary Botanical Gardens, where we talked all things green and glowing. Today, I'm looking forward to being joined by City Manager Kevin Lahner. As we finish out 2025, I thought it would be a great time to have City Manager Lahner on the program to talk about all the city's accomplishments this year, as well as take a deep dive into the topic on everyone's mind, the potential redevelopment of the GM JATCO site. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we jump into things, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Well, so from a professional point of view, I've been a city manager for 25 years. I have been doing it for a very long time. Actually, started my career down in the suburbs of Dallas and Fort Worth. And I've served here in Wisconsin, the communities of Burlington, Waukesha, and now Janesville. When I'm not here, I'm usually chasing kids around. So I have 11-year-old daughter, a 13-year-old son, and I have twin boys that are young adults and seniors in college. So that's mostly what I do, but when I do have free time, I'm a big outdoors person. So I like backpacking, hiking, fly fishing, and those sorts of things, and spend as much time outside as I possibly can.
Nice. So you're keeping yourself busy in and out of the job.
Trying to, yeah.
And I want to focus on the busy in the job before we jump into more stuff. I think it might be helpful for our viewers, Kevin, if you could explain what a city manager really is and what your typical day sort of looks like.
Yeah. So a city manager is a relatively unique form of government in Wisconsin. There's 13 city managers by statute in the state. And really, we are hired by the city council to run the city. And so the best way that I can describe it is that we are the CEO of the city organization. So we're in charge of the 500 and change employees that we have within the city. We're in charge with creating and managing the city budget. We are responsible for the implementation of the policies that are passed by the city council and all the normal things of an organization of this size. So, the hiring of our department heads, assisting with the management of the staff, all the cool things that we get to do around employee culture and things like that. So really the biggest, the most equivalent that I can come up with is the CEO of an organization. It's different from a mayor in that a mayor is elected and may or may not have experience in local government. The city manager, like I, have a master's of public administration. Obviously, I've been doing this a long time now. And so it's just a more familiarity with how a local government works. And it's pretty cool and exciting. You never know what you're going to get day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that you're rounding out your 25th year in local government. But I want to focus specifically on this last year that we had in 2025. It's December, 2026 is right around the corner. What sort of big highlights can you share that the city accomplished this year?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that we did is that we opened the Woodman Center. That was a labor of love for a lot of people for a very long period of time. And to be a part of the team that got it over the finish line was very, very exciting. So that was such a unique partnership and just is such a tremendous community asset for us to have in our community that it's it's really, really great to be a part of, and really great to be a part of all those opening ceremonies when we did it. And now being a part of, helping to run it and make sure that it's set up for success and those sorts of things. So that was very fulfilling. You don't get to do those things every day in our career. So, and then this year, we've been doing a lot of stuff around development work and really trying to get a focus on housing. And so we passed a new strategic plan not too long ago, and we're really focused on implementing those things. And so there's a variety of different things that are happening in those areas that are also really interesting to work on. Yeah,
and sort of on a similar note, but the flip side of it, what are some things we can look to improve for 2026?
I think that there's always ways to improve. We are working very hard on creative solutions for our unhoused population. There is some momentum there that I am excited about, that I think we can do a lot better in serving that population and as we move into 26. And so that is starting to get some serious legs, and really we're starting to work on some real solutions that I am very excited about. There's always other things that we can do. We really have to focus on our staffing challenges, particularly in the public safety arena. We're trying different things in attracting new recruits to both police and fire, all positions in the city, but police and fire in particular. Those are some things that we are really working hard on as well.
Yeah, and you sort of touched on it, but naturally this is where the strategic plan comes into play. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what that is and why it's important for the city to have?
Yeah, so the strategic plan is really just like the roadmap of where we're going as a community. And we recently went through a process where we had some community engagement and then an interactive process with the city council to come out with a new strategic plan. And in our strategic plan, it has focus areas. And like one of the focus areas is housing for all. That's one of the bigger ones that we are working on. Another one's organizational excellence. And so what that does is just provides the roadmap so that folks like me and our team can develop the programs and policies to support that plan. And so from the plan, we get into operationalizing what that looks like, developing the programs, developing new plans, trying to put into place the things that we can to encourage the goals of the plan. So that's really what it is. It's really just like a roadmap. We refer to it often with the city council, especially when we're developing budgets, when we're developing new policies, and say, this is in alignment with this goal in the strategic plan, and this is how we're going to move it forward.
And you mentioned housing for all, and that's one of the 7 strategic priorities that we have for the 2025 to 2029 strategic plan. Mm-hmm. How are those strategic priorities selected?
Yeah, so it's really an interactive process. It starts with data collection. It starts with what we've been doing. It starts with identification of the issues and opportunities and challenges that we're dealing with. We then, in our case, we went out to the community and we did a survey and asked folks what their priorities were, what are things that we could do better, things like that. And then we had a series of discussions with our city staff and then ultimately with the city council. And so there were multiple sessions with the city council. We used the help of a consultant to develop the plan. And through that process, that's how it got created.
And you touched briefly on it, but would you be able to expand on some of the projects and plans that have come about because of these strategic priorities?
Yeah, the one that I'm most excited about right now is probably our project on Beloit Avenue. And so that's related to the Housing for All priority, as I mentioned earlier. And this was a thing that we started working on several months ago, where we identified a piece of property that the city owned. It's currently being leased to a farmer, and it really didn't have a designated use for the future. And it was just leased farmland that the city happened to own through some acquisitions many years before. And identifying that housing is such a critical issue in our community, we said, what if we did something different? And what we did was we're in the process of doing a community-led process where we're asking folks, what they would like to see there, what it could look like in terms of housing, because we're trying to address this housing need. And so because the city owns the property, and the property itself is pretty developable, that there's a unique opportunity there. So we asked the community what they wanted. We had a workshop. We had an additional workshop with the city council and the plan commission. And now we're going to refine the plan from that feedback and then present it back out to the community coming up in December. Once that plan is finalized and adopted by the city council, we will take that concept plan and market it to the development community and saying, please bring us your best ideas. This is what the community said they wanted. Bring us your best ideas about how to develop this property. And hopefully that will result in several hundred additional housing units to the community. And that's just like kind of one unique thing that we had the ability to do that I think is really important. On the other side of that coin is relates to multiple tiers of our strategic plan is the update to the zoning code. So, probably very few folks get excited except for planners and maybe myself about an update to a zoning code. But it's really important about how the city develops in the future. And we have the opportunity to update and modernize our code to do things like encourage different types of housing that we don't already have, to do things like smaller lot sizes, to allow things like accessory dwelling units and things like that. And so those things combined are what is really related to that plan. So there's all these things in the works that we're working on that are related to that roadmap for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that we are deep in the process of right now, the topic on everybody's mind is the GM JATCO redevelopment, specifically with the focus on potential data centers coming to the city.
Yeah.
I sort of want to scoot all the way back. I think it might be beneficial for our viewers to start at the beginning of the acquisition process and kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So, as most folks know, but is that property was owned by a private development company that purchased it from GM and had come to the city and made several different commitments related to the property. They did take the property down. They did demolish the existing buildings. But for whatever reason, progress had stalled on that site. And it was a blighted property. There was some other issues related to it. And so the city council asked me to develop a plan to address it. And one of the things that was available to us was to acquire the property through eminent domain because of blight, because it's in a blighted condition. And so we went through a process with the city council and did that work. And so now we own 7 properties. We started along the path and are continuing along the path of forming an advisory committee to develop a plan for the ultimate redevelopment of that site. And it's somewhat similar to what we're doing with this Beloit Avenue project, but obviously on a much bigger scale. And so the committee itself was going to drive that process. It is driving that process when it comes to selection of a consultant and the ultimately the development of what we want it to be when it's developed. And so that's kind of how it got started. And that was our original intent, and we are continuing with that process as we move forward. What was, that came out of the blue from when we acquired the property is that we started getting inquiries about data centers. And for various reasons, the ability, and mostly it's the ability to get power there in a relatively quick time frame, is why this data center folks started to ask questions about the site. And so when we were approached with this possibility, we started to do a little bit of research. We got some information, and we went to the city council, and we basically said to them, we weren't planning this. We've been contacted. Here are some high-level pros and cons to this discussion. What would you like us to do? And the council said, yes, we should explore it, but we want the public to know that it's being explored. And so that's how we came up with the request for proposal process, where it lands us to where we are now.
Yeah, and in terms of where we are now, at the time of filming this, the city council has just approved the city to enter into a letter of intent with Viridian Partners. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what that all entails? What does that mean?
Yeah, so when we did the RFP process, we got 2 responses back, and we as a staff did a bunch of due diligence on the company. So we interviewed them, we researched their team, we actually went and visited sites, we talked to communities where they had done work, and we did as much as we possibly could to figure out is this a good fit for us to consider a path forward. And through that process, we selected the group that we're working with now, which is Viridian Partners. And we are at the 1-yard line of this process. That's the thing that I want to make folks understand. We're at the 1-yard line of this process. So what is happening now is that the letter of intent basically is we think we are interested in doing a deal together. We are making a commitment to work together to figure it out. And if something happens along the way where it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. If the data and the evidence collected along the way says that it could work, then we will work towards a sale agreement and a development agreement with Viridian. So that's where we are right now. They proposed an up to 800 megawatt data center on the site. There are multiple things that have to happen before we take a step forward. Most importantly for the company is meeting with the Department of Natural Resources, figuring out what they are going to require for remediation of the site, and working through engineering of what the power transmission would look like to the site with Alliant and ATC, American Transmission Company. So those 2 things are what have to happen next while we continue discussions kind of in parallel on a development agreement and those types of things for that site.
And you brought up the remediation process of the land. A word that's been thrown out a lot is brownfield and brownfield site, which is what the property is. I think it would be beneficial to our viewers if you could explain what that means and how does that translate to the project.
Yeah, so this is an incredibly unique opportunity because the property itself is a brownfield. What that means is that it has contamination on it, and we know a lot about what is on it. It has been well documented and well mapped. There is a lot of data on what is located there, but long and short of it, there's a lot of soil contamination on that property. And for anything to happen there, that contamination has to be dealt with. And what that means is that you have to work with the DNR through a process that identifies how you're going to deal with the contamination on the property to make sure that anything that gets built there next is safe, that you're not exposing the general public to contaminants, that you're not spreading it, that it is handled in the way that's appropriate for that site. And that cost is very roughly estimated at $30 million. And so for anything to happen there, any new development to happen there, we were faced with a $30 million cost. And we are prepared to go down that path. So the data center project goes away, and we will go down the original path, which is to create a concept plan, not including a data center in it, that would show different uses, that would evaluate the site for what would be appropriate for it. And then ultimately we would create a concept plan that would then market the site to the development team. With a data center project in it, we would do the same thing with the GM JATCO advisory board. It would be property, a portion of it, which would be dedicated to the data center. The rest of it would be available for development. With this project, what we have is a tremendous opportunity to get the entire site addressed with zero city dollars. The alternative is decades of expense. And the other piece of that is that the way data centers are built today, we're talking about up to $1 billion of value in one single development. And there's nothing else that would be on that scale that could add that amount of value to our community. And then there's the other parts of it that I think are really important is the construction jobs during construction jobs during transitions within the data center itself, and then the permanent jobs that would be on that site as well. So that's kind of how the whole thing works. We're still going to work through a redevelopment plan with the GM JATCO advisory board that both includes a data center and one that does not, because we're at the 1 yard line with the one project, and it would be foolish of us not to develop a plan that both includes one and that does not as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought up jobs, because that has been one of the many concerns that I've seen the community has arising under the scope of data centers. And I was hoping you could just touch on some of those other concerns that we've heard from folks.
Yeah.
And maybe give fact to truth on some of the concerns and share what we know.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I want to make sure that I point out is that the folks that are bringing up concerns have valid concerns, and it's based upon the information that they have found regarding these projects. And we have to acknowledge that some of these projects have been done poorly, or they have been done earlier as they were developed, and there were certain things that were not taken into account or had not been addressed yet as the projects have been developed. And so when you are out there and you see a bunch of information and you believe it's from valid sources, I understand that concern completely. We cannot discount that. We also, as a community leader looking out for the city as a whole, we have to ensure that those concerns are addressed. And we have to make sure that what we're going to do, if it goes forward, is the appropriate thing for our city. And so we have to evaluate all of those things as well. The primary concerns when it comes to a data center are water use, power use, and sound. There are other ones that we are hearing. There's stuff about like electromagnetic, whatever that would be, the electromagnetic fields around electrical lines and things like that. But the primary ones are water use, power use, and sound, and various iterations of why they are a concern. On the water use thing, data centers did for a long time use a lot of water. That was the primary way they cooled their equipment. And the systems that they had in place at the time used water inefficiently. And so there have been some data centers that have created struggles for communities because of the amount of water use that they used. What has occurred in the most recent ones that have been built is that the industry figured it out. And it's a benefit to both the city, obviously, and the industry to use less water. And so the most recent ones that are being built with a combination of some sort of hybrid of air-cooled and closed-loop liquid-cooled systems. There are benefits and drawbacks to both, but they're being built with new technology that use significantly less water than they used to. And so by comparison, the water use will be anywhere, depending upon what estimate you use, between 70,000 gallons a day and 100,000 gallons a day. At its peak, GM used 2.5 million gallons of water a day. At the projected amount that we have for a data center at full build out, mind you, that would be the full project itself, it would rank around number 10 of our big water users in the community. A lot, but not like it used to be.
Right.
And so that's like one of the things that I think is really important. And the development company has already committed to, in their letter of intent, to use the latest technology, and we would require that within a development agreement to use technology that would use the least amount of water, and that obviously that made sense for the project. The other issue is power. The data centers use a lot of power. The reason why our site is being considered is because they think they can get a relatively large amount of power to the site relatively quickly. I shouldn't say relatively large amount, a large amount of power to the site relatively quickly. And so that is 100% true. They do. The concern is related to, that is accompanied by that, is that power rates are going to go up because of it, and it's going to negatively impact, or the grid is going to be impacted by it. That is not the case. And so what happens within a development, any major development that's going to use a lot of power, is that the companies themselves pay for all the infrastructure and they pay for all the power that they take. And they have to agree to that by contract with Alliant, because Alliant is expending a lot of resources to get the power to them, and they have to take it if it's delivered to them. And so those costs are not passed on to the consumer, and the increase in redundancy needed for data centers actually improves the grid, doesn't decline the grid. There are other investments that Alliant is making related to resilience and stuff like that. Those costs may be passed on to consumers, but those things are also regulated by the Public Service Commission. And so Alliant has to justify any rate increases that they want to make to the state's Public Service Commission, and they have to have a rational basis and a justification for it. And so, yes, they consume a lot of power. The facts is that Wisconsin is going to get more data centers. Alliance service area is going to get more data centers. And so the question that you have with that is that, do you work through, if you're in a position like mine and the opportunity is there and they're interested in your community, do you say no and reap no benefit from it, or does it go somewhere else? Because the same issues with the power consumption and the need to generate more power to provide it to data center sites is still going to exist, whether it's in the city of Janesville or in the city of Edgerton or anywhere else in between. So that's the other issue, is the power issue. The third one is noise. Again, that has been a concern. The cooling systems create noise, and there are a multitude of things that are happening now to address that issue. And so between sound containment systems and new technology and the way you orient buildings and the way where you put the cooling systems all impact that. And we would also work with the development, through the development agreement, with the developer to ensure that the noise is contained down as low as we can make it. And the newest ones have succeeded in doing so, and many of the new data centers are actually very, very, very close to residential properties and have very little impact. At the end of the day, what they are big light industrial buildings that get very few trucks, no trains, and the cars that are there, the vehicles that are there are employees that are working within the building, either permanent employees or contractors working on the facilities. So those are kind of the big three. And, it's difficult because there is a lot of information out there about the negative effects, and some of that information is true. But I don't think it recognizes the research, and the reporting hasn't caught up to the most recent versions of what is occurring, and they don't report about the ones that you never hear about. So there are hundreds of these things, thousands of these things across the country that have been there for years that have created no issues. And, it wouldn't be a news story if a building was built and nothing happened.
Right. Thank you for that, Kevin. I think that was super informative. City staff has done a lot of research. City council has done a lot of research. You've done a lot of research, and the residents are doing a lot of research too. And it's been really exciting to see the community engagement and to see residents get so involved in city topics. And because of that, they're really involved in what does this process look like? Right. What are the steps? So if people are interested in finding out what the city is up to, what's going on with GM JATCO or data centers or anything, where can they go for more information?
Yeah, so we have a website set up on our city website where you can get all the latest that we have, and we will continually update that throughout the course of the next several hundred days. We will be doing different community forums and stuff when it makes sense, when there's information to share, when we have the ability to get the right partners together to have those conversations. We will be doing updates regularly to the city council, and we'll be doing media interviews like this one and others to be able to get that information out. But we will continually be engaged with that as we move forward, and we try very hard to get the information out. We've recently moved venues to make sure that we could accommodate the number of people that showed up, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, wonderful. Kevin, we're about kind of the rounding out portion of this episode. And I want to end on, because we are wrapping up 2025. When you look back at the year, what was something big or small that really reminded you of why you love serving our community?
One of the biggest things that happened to me just recently was I ran into an employee in the lunchroom, somebody who had been a 25-year employee, more than 25-year employee that was getting ready to retire. And he just, unprovoked, just talked about how great of an experience it had been for him and for his family. And you could tell that he loved his job and loved serving his community. And that's what's really, really beneficial for us. I mean, that's really beneficial for somebody like me, because, we get so involved in the day-to-day stuff, and we get sometimes sucked into the controversies of the day or whatever. And folks, in today's day and age, folks like to call you names or, question your credibility and all sorts of stuff that is a part of what working in the public eye is like today. But, the thing that gets me up in the morning the most is trying to create an environment where good people can do good work. And, this emotion comes out of nowhere. And so that's really what gets me excited, because there are so many good people doing good work for the city. And they've chose that path. They chose the path of public service for a reason. And whether it's a firefighter or a construction inspector or, a code enforcement officer or anybody like that, just trying to create an environment where they can thrive. And then in turn, just making the community better every day, just trying to find ways to make things better is just really, really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just about out of time, Kevin. Before I let you go, if folks have more questions or they want some information, how can they reach out?
Yeah, so you can reach out. You can always email me is probably the best. You can always call City Hall, and we try to get back to folks as quickly as we can. If I can't help you, I usually try to facilitate you getting your answers to somebody within the staff who's much smarter than me and can answer your question much more thoroughly than I could. But those are the best ways to do it.
All right. Well, awesome. We are out of time, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, on behalf of myself and the viewers, I know we're all super excited to see what the future of GM JATCO holds, as well as the city in general. So we're very excited to see how things progress. And we just really appreciate you being around and being on the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of our viewers, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today and for all that you do to help make Janesville a vibrant and diverse community to discover life's opportunities. I invite you to stay connected with the city by following us on Facebook and Instagram, signing up for notifications from the JPD via the Nixle app, and signing up to receive city press releases by visiting janesvillewi.gov/email lists. For Park Place Views and the City of Janesville, I'm Amanda Gilbert. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again in 2026.